right, welcome everybody. It is Sunday, June 11th, and we're here inside the home of Greenfire CrossFit. So let's do a little introduction. I'm Trista, owner of Greenfire CrossFit and part of Gym Therapy Inc.
I'm Alyssa.
She's a good cat.
I didn't know that we were doing all that. I mean, nobody really, I don't think anybody knows what a BHA is, so that's what I am.
What's a BHA?
I'm a BHA at Co-Prep.
What's that mean?
It's a behavioral health associate.
Okay.
Which I don't like the associate part because it just sounds weird, but I work with juvenile sex offenders and juvenile criminals between the ages of 12 and 20.
And you're also a certified peer specialist and a certified recovery specialist? Or
Not a recovery specialist yet, no.
I
can do that now. I have enough clean time to actually do it. So.
Awesome.
Good. I'm Justin, owner, co-owner, operator,
Let's try that.
co-owner, operator of Gym Therapy.
Yes.
And our guest today.
I am Chase Sutphin. I am a member of Greenfire CrossFit and friend of all of the members here.
That's right. And
Friend of the
veteran.
family, huh?
Veteran, cybersecurity engineer, father of 6, husband, all of those things.
All the good stuff. What do you do for a living?
I am a systems engineer, so I work in cybersecurity. I support enterprise carrier customers, so help them design and architect networks that will be globally reaching.
Okay. And then what is it? Skilled Creations?
Skilled Creations, yes. We have a family business that we do custom engraving, primarily on insulated tumblers, and we have done some, wooden and other materials as well, but primarily the tumblers is really what we focus on.
Cool. We saw them last week in our video with Farzi. A water bottle. It's awesome.
Yeah,
and candles. You guys make candles?
We do make candles, yeah. That's it's kind of a side thing. We owned a business for 4 or 5 years. It was called Soy Clever Candle Company, and we shut that down before COVID actually started, just because we kind of needed to take a break from things. But my wife has brought that back up, and my daughters are like all excited about getting back into making wooden wick candles. They're all natural. We use only soy, and we use wooden wicks, and we source our wicks from one of the only manufacturers that don't treat their wicks before we get.
Oh, nice. So less chemicals, stuff like
less
that.
chemicals, no phthalates, no parabens, we don't use pure essential oils because we found out over time that real essential oils are actually, they just don't really work in candles. They smell great until you light it, and then you don't smell anything. So
They don't. Okay.
yeah, so we use fragrances that are natural. They don't have any phthalates in them, and they shouldn't leave any like black sooting or anything like that unless you have the wrong size wick.
Which is interesting. I never really knew that candles did that until I was watching some videos of people cleaning houses. And all of like the toxins and just like it was like a sludge on the wall they had to clean off.
Did you ever leave
Nicotine from a cigarette or something.
at Servpro, that's one of the few things that is almost impossible to get off the walls is cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
My very first house was the guy died of lung cancer.
Oh, good.
And
No
you could
wonder
tell
why.
why. It was so bad.
Yeah.
It was like
Gross.
the walls were like bleeding orange when we were cleaning them. It was a lot.
Yeah, you can tell between people's fingers if they're long-term smokers and they have facial hair and it's
burnt
like
up a little
grayish.
bit,
It's it's
Don't
not
smoke,
great.
kids. Don't
Yeah,
do it.
definitely don't. Yeah, we started
Read
the candle
books.
company. It was surprising. It was kind of like what can we do to get the kids involved that aren't, like teach them about entrepreneurship that's not a lemonade stand. And
Yes.
I was like, candles can't be that hard. I spent probably 4 or 5 months just in R&D trying to get it perfect, because what I did not want was a candle that left wax all over the sides,
Yes.
or a candle that burned wrong or had a flame that was that big coming out of it that set your house on fire. So it took a lot more than I thought. And the same thing with engraving. You would think you just stick it on there and the laser does everything, but it takes a lot of practice. Each color that you engrave on engraves different, so you have to test each one of them. If you test it and it comes out wrong, a lot of people are like, oh, good enough. But one of my personality flaws with all of these things is that I just keep, even when I'm like, that's pretty good, it looks really good, I'm like,
Is that
I bet
really
I could get
flaw,
it better.
though?
Yeah.
Is that a flaw though? Is that
Well,
a
I don't
good
do it
thing?
for everything, right? Like, some things I'm sure my wife would be like, why can't you clean the house like that? So it's not everything, but on some things I'm like, it's not good enough. I want to get a little bit better.
Okay, so let's talk about we're going to talk about PTSD a little bit, which is one of the reasons we have Chase here. And let's talk about your what branch of the service were you in?
I was in the Army Reserves, and I started off. It's funny. I joined the reserves with the whole thought of like 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of the year. We were the commo unit on Fort Gordon, which is a communications base. For some reason, most of the active duty units there don't have like a full communications team. So every time they would go to the field, we got called on orders to go support all of the active duty units. So I didn't ever really get the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. Most years I was on orders for 5 or 6 months out of the year. And then we did one deployment to Baghdad. Well, we spent about 2 months in Balad, and then we transitioned to Baghdad, and that's where I did the rest of my tour. It was in Baghdad before.
How long were you there?
It was so because we were reserves, they made us go out early, right? So we went to Fort Hood and we spent 4 months there pre-mobilizing. So that's where we learned, and they made us basically practice against the active duty units at Fort Hood, and until we could get faster than them. And we were way faster at deploying our units. We took tactical communications. It was basically you roll out into a field where there's nothing there, and we set up satellites and we set up everything to where we could make worldwide communications happen we had to get it within an hour. And so we'd get everything up and running, and then they would say, great, tear it down, let's go back to the motor pool, and we're gonna go do it again. So we just did that over and over. And then once we got that down, then they were like, okay, now we're gonna go to North Fort Hood, and this is where you're gonna start practicing clearing buildings, convoys, truck rolls and foot patrols and stuff. So then we did that for a few months. And once you go to North Fort Hood, it's like you're living in barracks. You're not allowed to leave post. You're stuck there basically until you leave. So we did that. And we got 1 weekend to go back home. And then we came back to Fort Hood, and then we mobilized. So we flew out from there. So all in, it was like 19 months that we were gone.
Okay.
And in country, we were there for 12 months.
What year?
2006, 2007.
Okay. 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year is my workout regimen.
Yeah. That's not how it's supposed to be, Justin.
Okay, so we're here to talk about PTSD, what it is. A lot of people are familiar with the term because they hear it, but they really don't know what it means. So I want to dig into PTSD, and feel free to jump in and talk about any experiences you have going through. So PTSD is a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event, either experiencing it or witnessing it. So sometimes, people that witness a crime, witness an assault, that's something that can cause PTSD. And this is information coming from the Mayo Clinic. Symptoms can include flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety, as well as uncontrollable thoughts regarding the event. And symptoms can sometimes start within a month, or they can appear actually years later, just by something that triggers it.
And they can appear in nightmares.
Yeah. Yeah, the ones that appear later too, people will call that delayed PTSD or complex PTSD, which we'll cover a little bit later.
Yeah. And they can affect obviously your social life, your work life, and relationships.
For sure.
Romantic relationships, just family relationships, whatever it is.
Where I work, like sometimes like these kids are able to play the game systems and stuff. Like some kids aren't allowed to play Call of Duty and shoot games, or I don't know what the names of them are, but a lot of kids aren't allowed to play them because like the sounds of shooting and like just guns in general. Some kids like are good with guns. Yeah. So, but then like a lot of times if there's like a staff member yelling or something, a kid will cower in the corner, like because they're used to somebody else yelling at them and abusing them verbally and that kind of stuff. Like I've never seen so many triggered kids in one place in my life.
And I think what's interesting is that everybody's trigger can be different, and you can't assume that just because something triggers you, that would trigger another person. Like a big one for me is fireworks, especially on like the days outside of when you would think that they're going to go off, right? So you plan for Memorial Day or July 4th or New Year's, but a lot of times you don't plan for 2 days before that or 3 days after that.
Or just some random August day where somebody has,
And so in those situations when they do trigger, for me in particular, it is like an immediate remembering of all the gunfire, the mortar attacks, like those things happening. That's what it brings me back to. And I'm at a point now where I can calm myself down, but there was a point in my life where I couldn't, and it was just for the rest of the night I would be freaked out and I would be on edge. I had to drink. I had to do something to get myself out of it. But fireworks don't trigger everybody. There are a lot of veterans that I know that are like, doesn't bother me at all. I don't
Let's
care.
go blow stuff up.
No,
they love
no,
guns,
yeah. And like being around guns don't bother me because I've been around them. After coming back from the military, or from Iraq, I was a weapons tester for 2 years. So I did that, like, that was my living. I shot guns every day for 10 hours a day, and I got burned out from it. I don't really shoot anymore because that's all I did for such a long time.
Sure. Yeah.
But for a lot of people, it doesn't trigger that. So each person has a different thing. And I think one of the big things for me is, like, my wife knows what my triggers are, and she will try to put us in situations to avoid certain things. I've gotten better, but it used to be just going into a restaurant. If it got too busy or it was too much noise or too much commotion, like you were saying the other day, like somebody's running beside you and there's a bike going and there's music playing and somebody's too loud, like there's too much stuff happening.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I would go into a full-on panic attack, and I would get sick. Like, I would want to throw up. So I would have to leave. And there was plenty of times where we missed concerts, we missed big events that we had planned, purchased, went to, and we got there and it was just too much and I couldn't handle it. And I'm like, gotta go, right? And having a spouse who is understanding of that is very difficult. And for her to say, like, and sometimes I would try to push through it and she could see it and say, like, let's leave.
Yes.
Before I had to say anything, she'd be like, this is too much, let's leave. And it was
awesome.
super important.
And that's one thing I went to the training. CrossFit offered a mental health training that is trauma informed and athlete centered. So when I can I've already have a hypervigilance just from the trauma I went through in my life, that I can kind of sense when people are uncomfortable, but I can kind of pick up when people are overwhelmed or when they're feeling like something is too much. And that to me was a really great training, because a lot of times you don't know that people don't like someone standing behind them. Like, you would walk behind someone to correct them and it might scare them. So you actually, my thing now is to say, like, do you mind if I correct you or I touch your back? Or, and I ask people first, when I might not have always had that thought, just because it wouldn't bother me.
Yeah.
But I had to realize that it can affect other people, because you don't know most women have been a victim of assault at some point in their lives.
Yeah.
Most women, pretty much all women.
Yeah.
And you have to be, like, really thoughtful of that. Being a female trainer, it's a little bit easier for me to go and touch and train someone. But for a male counterpart, we have 2 male trainers. They have to be more cautious of that because it can trigger someone. So that's stuff I think about a lot. And when I did this training, the guy that did the training was an actual, he is a therapist, or I think he might be a psychologist, and he had said every veteran he has ever worked with has backed into this space. They come from the parking space, they back in, and he asked them why.
What about the door?
And
Do you typically face the door whenever you sit in a room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if I trust a place, if I've built enough confidence of being somewhere that it doesn't bother me anymore, like here, it doesn't bother me anymore because I've gotten used to being, like, in the gym is a safe space for me versus like if I go to a restaurant, or if I'm, like, when I travel for work, just walking into a gas station, I'll stand in a way where I'm facing towards both doors. Like, I can always feel,
always
and I can
spot the
see,
exit.
I can always see what's around me, because it's a very uncomfortable, you feel vulnerable not knowing what's there. Like, you were talking about coming up behind somebody. I traveled for work last year. We were in Virginia, and one of my coworkers, we were walking to the restaurant, and he drove separately, and he ran up behind. This is nighttime. He ran up behind us, and he's like, "Whoa!" And I almost punched him in the face. And I'm like, he was like, "Whoa, I'm sorry, man. I was just kidding." I'm like, you got to be careful, man. Like, for each person, it's a different thing. You never know what's going to trigger, but yeah, definitely doorways. Backing into parking spots, it's not a big, like, especially at home, I back in every time. In certain parking lots, it's inconvenient to back in, so you don't do it in some situations. Here, because the way all of the parking spaces
like
are pointing
diagonal.
one way, it's weird to back in. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. I thought that was really interesting. And he said that he had conversations with veterans about that, of saying, I'll know my job is done when you stop backing into spaces.
I have kids at work that, like, whenever we go someplace, like whenever we go from the unit they're on to get their food and they go to classroom, whatever, they have to get in a straight single file line. And a lot of kids lean up against the wall.
Yeah.
And there's usually 10 or 11 of them when everybody gets in a line, and then we start at 1, everybody says their number, and then we go. But as we're walking, they're always looking.
Behind them.
Always looking.
None of these people are probably going to grow up to be Uber drivers.
Let's hope not.
Let's talk about the 4 types of PTSD symptoms. One is intrusive memories. So recurrent, unwanted, and distressing thoughts. Reliving the event as if it were happening again. So flashbacks, which is, I'm sure, something that you've dealt with being in the military. Upsetting dreams or nightmares. Severe emotional distress and physical reactions to something that reminds you of the event. So it doesn't even fireworks.
Yep.
That's a great example of, and it's something that citizens, we really wouldn't think about. We just wouldn't think about that as you're lighting off fireworks and how it could affect someone down the street that's been in combat. And I thought that was that's something to think about.
Because fireworks are a celebration. Like, who doesn't like fireworks?
Yeah.
That's something that if you never experienced any sort of traumatic military experiences or gun type experiences, it's party time.
Yeah, and I don't want it to seem like it's only a military thing. Like another huge part of our life is our youngest has a heart condition, and we found out that he was going to be born with a heart condition when he was 20 weeks in pregnancy with my wife. So we relocated to Pennsylvania to have him born here and work with a specific doctor. And we spent 7 months in Children's Hospital. And so now going into hospitals, when I had to take my son to the emergency room when he broke his wrist, our oldest son, like walking into the ER, just being in that situation again was a trigger for me. Like it threw a lot of things off, because I remember spending every night in the CICU and listening to those beeps go off and listening to babies cry all night long, because there's nobody there with them half the time. They're just by themselves and they're in pain and they have all this, wires and stuff hanging all over them. So, it's definitely not just a military thing. There's lots of situations that can cause that post-traumatic stress disorder, and then you have no idea what event is it could be a beep. Like, there has been times where I've been at home and the freaking oven beeped, and it reminded me of, the heart rate monitor going off. So
I had that kind of thing. My cousin got killed in a car accident in 2012, and we pretty much as a family unit rushed to the Conemaugh Hospital. And I don't think I've ever heard anything more blood curdling than the sound of a mother crying for the loss of their child. Ooh. And I could hear my aunt crying. Anytime I have to go to that hospital, I have to talk myself into walking through the door. It is traumatizing. And she, my aunt, she still can't go to that hospital very easily. I don't know that she's been to the funeral home that her daughter was in since. It's just so hard when you live especially when it's something like a sudden loss. When someone has cancer or they're going through different long-term, you can prepare in the best way possible for it. Not prepare, but it's coming. When it's a sudden loss.
That was 11 years ago. It amazes me that even after 11 years, that something is going to keep reminding you, and your brain's going to keep thinking of the same exact issue that you had whenever you walked in the door.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to drive through Hillsdale where Leroy wrecked and see where he wrecked and seeing it there. His parents have to drive by that all the time. And I think about that often of how hard that struggle must be. It's hard for me. And that's something I constantly have to talk myself through those feelings, because it's hard. And this is stuff that people don't talk about that's uncomfortable, but it does. It sends you right back into those spirals. And then this kind of segues right into the next thing where it's avoidance. Avoidance is the next symptom, where we avoid thinking about it, we avoid talking about it, and we avoid people or places that are reminders. When Leroy died, it was really hard for me to go to our friend Jared's house. And that's where we always hung out. They built the bar there. Jared built this house and he was remodeling it. And we all went inside there and we built the bar first. So we could go hang out at the bar and have our friend group there together. It was really hard for me to go there. And every time I went there, I was super emotional. I was like, this isn't good for me. I need to step back for a while. And then the first time I went there and didn't cry, I was like, hey, I didn't cry. I didn't cry.
It's a big step.
And it took a lot to do. It was a lot.
I think there's a big difference between avoidance and taking breaks. Because from time to time, you got to give yourself just a break. In any sort of mental illness, mental health, just stress, stuff like that. it's important to take 15 minutes and be like, I'm gonna play a game, I'm gonna do this, something healthy, I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna try to take my mind off of it. And you do have to think and process these problems,
Yeah.
but you can't avoid them, because
Yeah.
if you avoid them, they're gonna manifest in some other way, whether it's alcoholism, some sort of bad trait. It's gonna come out.
It's going to come back. Yeah. I mean,
100%.
you can, I don't know if y'all have ever seen Central Intelligence with Kevin
Kevin Hart.
in The Rock. And he's like, what did you do, man? He's like, I took all that pain and I just smushed it down real tight. And I never thought about it again. It's like, yeah, really, one day it's going to snap
gonna
and you're just going
snap
to be like,
out,
"Rah!"
yeah. That happens to me a lot, like when it comes to like emotional things and crying and stuff. Like things will happen and I'll just bury it and bury it and bury it, and then like one small thing, I don't know, I stubbed my toe and it made me cry, you know, and then it just is all like a whole flood, and all of everything that I put down has come up.
And even when you think you're doing the right things, like when Leroy died, I listened to books, I did all of those steps to like thought I was healing, but I wasn't really feeling the emotions, and I really didn't even know what my feelings were. Going through the trauma I went through in life and losing people, I didn't even know what my feelings really were. So until I started like identifying like this is what I'm feeling and understanding it, I didn't know how to talk about it. You know, so when through my marriage, like we had a huge loss, a bunch of losses. This was the biggest one. We didn't know how to communicate our feelings because we didn't even know what the feelings were.
Sorry, go ahead.
Terrible. And it was like, it's a terrible thing. And that's how you end up going down these like, where you're making poor life choices as you're going because you're not doing the right steps.
Yeah, my last 2 years has been huge. I mean, growth is it's wild, because I even stuff even happens to me now, and I don't exactly recognize what the feeling is until I like look back on it, think on it a couple of days, weeks, whatever after it happens, because it's just you push them down for so long and you just stay like silent and just like whatever. You know, like you're a dude, just take care of it, you know, and then sometimes whenever they finally come out and you're like, oh shit, that was just sadness.
Yeah.
You know,
Atlas.
and sometimes
Yeah.
anger is actually just buried sadness that builds up. There's a very fine line between those two feelings.
Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown was probably a game changer for me as far as identifying feelings and emotions and what they actually mean. Third one, negative changes in thinking and mood. So negative thoughts about yourself and others, hopelessness about the future, memory problems, including not remembering important aspects of the traumatic event, difficulty maintaining close relationships, feeling detached from your family and friends, a lack of interest in activities that you once enjoyed, and difficulty experiencing positive emotions and feeling emotionally numb.
Hopelessness was the big one that stuck out there to me. Mental health symptoms come in waves, and it's very hard whenever you're going through something stressful to believe that things are going to get better. And I feel like so many people, if we always focus on, you know, you have 10 reviews online about a business and one of them's bad and 9 of them's good. You always focus on the bad one.
Yeah.
And everyone always assumes the shoe's going to drop. When things are good, they always assume the shoe's going to drop.
Yeah.
But when you're in this unregulated state or like manic or hypomanic, any of that stuff, and you feel good, it's like, man, I'm making plans. I want to do this. I have 4 different things I want to do. And then 3 days later, it's like, I don't even want to get out of bed. I don't care. Yeah. And that's tough.
Mine's like that throughout one day. Like I'll do all this, what you just said, make the plans and all the fun stuff, and I'll start one project, and I'm like, I don't even want to do this anymore. And then 3 hours later, I'll be like, well, maybe I should finish it.
Perfectionism's like that too. Whenever you just keep doing something. I think it might have been Stephen King. I think it was Stephen King said that defense attorneys and painters need someone to hit them in the back of the head so they know when to stop talking or what stop painting.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things in sales, right? They always tell you, like, once you made the sale, stop
Shut up.
selling.
Yes.
Right? Like, quit. Just because they're not talking, don't keep talking.
Yeah,
Don't keep
because
trying
you're
to
talking
sell.
them out of it.
You
Yeah.
made the sale, just stop.
Yeah. How's your kids? How's your dog?
And hopelessness about the future too. You know, when people have sudden losses, that's one of the biggest ones. Nothing's ever going to be the same. When I talked about grief, that was the biggest thing for me that made me just want to stop living, is like nothing is ever going to be the same. And that feeling of hopelessness is the scariest feeling I think I've ever felt, of not being able, like, you're never ever going to get past this. You're never going to be able to go forward.
It's incredible, Chase, that I thought that was super interesting. Where'd you move from when you moved up here to go to Children's?
Florida.
Florida.
Yeah, so 2019, I left. I was working for Verizon. I was a security engineer. I left that job, and we bought a school bus, like retired school bus.
Awesome.
I ripped all the seats out. We built it into a house. We lived in it for about a year.
That's
we moved in
amazing.
that.
How many?
We
Well,
had-
you have 6
We had
kids. so
5 kids at the time. We had
Oh
4
my
dogs at
gosh.
the time. And
That's amazing.
we
That's-
traveled back and forth basically between my parents' house, some land that we stayed at in North Carolina, and then my wife's parents' house. And we just kind of went back and forth. And then they were like, hey, just come stay down in Florida with us. You can, stay on the property, focus on, paying off student loan debt and stuff that we wanted to work on. We're like,
Yeah.
cool, yeah. So we went down there, found out about our son, and that changed everything, right?
Of course.
And it was like, okay, we have to, we sold the bus. We actually were moving to St. Petersburg in Florida so that we could be within 5 minutes of the hospital where he was going to be born. We had one meeting with the cardiothoracic surgeon, the surgeon who would be doing the work, and we were like, no.
No.
So
Oh,
we
man.
sent actually to the Mayo Clinic. We sent all of his records to the Mayo Clinic and to Children's. The guy at the Mayo Clinic, who is one of the world renowned for, he's got Epstein's anomaly, which is a malformation of the tricuspid valve. So basically, when your heart pumps on the right ventricle, when it pumps, that valve closes. It builds pressure. His never closed, so it's called regurgitation, and it just basically pushes the blood back up into the aortic valve instead of going out into the body like it's supposed to.
It's kind of like just a pump whenever it loses its prime.
Yep.
Yeah.
Basically. So the guy in Pittsburgh, his name is Jose da Silva. He's from Brazil. He invented the tricuspid valve repair procedure. And we sent the stuff to him. He said, based on what we see, I think we could use your son's tissues and reconstruct his tricuspid valve without doing a valve replacement. So,
That's awesome.
and he said, we'll take your case if you'll come. That was a Monday that we did Tressa talk to him. And Tuesday we dropped the kids off with her parents in Bradenton, Florida. Wednesday we left. And then we were up in Pittsburgh on Thursday.
Chase, that's incredible.
We spent
That
1
is-
week.
that is absolutely
and
incredible.
we spent
Yeah.
3 days at the hotel, 2 days at the hotel. Then we got into the Ronald McDonald House,
Mm-hmm.
and we stayed there until we went back in May the next year. So that was
That's amazing.
Do you have
7 months.
Do you have a coffee cup that says #1 dad? Because you might be it, buddy.
No, yeah.
No, it was what was the hardest. It was hard to leave all of our kids, right? Because
Sure.
we'd never been away from our kids. So to leave them with my in-laws and say like, hey, we need y'all to, we have to give him the best chance, and the best chance is going to be the guy who invented this. So.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
We left and we came up here and we really didn't look back, and it was like, we're gonna make it work. I took the job I have. I took the interview on the way to Pittsburgh.
Oh, wow.
Driving up here, we stopped at a Cracker Barrel. My wife went inside. I took the interview in the parking lot. I took 5 more interviews with that team in the Ronald McDonald House. I worked in the Ronald McDonald House during the day, and I stayed in the CICU overnight, and Tressa was in during the day and went back to the room to sleep at night. So we just rotated
Wow.
the whole time. So I worked remotely, which was it was amazing to be able to do that and take care of. The guy who hired me was like, "You were the easiest hire ever."
that's
The only thing that I said was like, "I need to see your benefits."
Sure.
That was the only
Absolutely,
thing I worried
yeah.
about. I didn't care about anything else. I was like, price, salary, whatever is fine. Let me see the benefits, and let me talk to a benefits person. And once they said like, yeah, you'll be covered, I was like, let's do it.
Goes, yeah.
Yeah.
And just as amazing as Chase is, his wife is equally amazing.
Awesome.
She is incredible. I get the opportunity to work with his wife and his kids.
Yeah.
Incredible family. And the things that, like, hearing them as a team, working back and forth, like having a child with health complications is not easy. And there are days that he comes in sleep deprived, she comes in sleep deprived, and they work as a team
Yeah.
to make that happen. And for a lot of people, they don't know how to make that partnership work. And it's incredible getting to hear
Your
it.
kids
incredible
are
to see.
your kids are lucky to have you, and we're
yeah.
we're glad to have you here too. You add a lot to this place, so appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it.
And not a lot of people travel to live in Indiana, PA.
No.
Just saying.
Well, so we actually stayed at the campground, Wheeling Campground in Shalakta is where we stayed because we were in a camper after we came back from the hospital. The cardiologist in Florida said, we probably need to do a cath, like let's get in there, and we were like, we've never worked with y'all, so we called up here. The cardiologist here was like, oh, we can work you in, like, yeah, come up and take a vacation, come up. And so we came up. They were like, they did the cath. We went over to was it Poconos, whatever,
Poconos.
those
Yeah,
mountains. We went over there, and they called us like the next week. They're like, come back. He needs to go into surgery. He needs to have another heart surgery. So we went back. We stayed in the campground, and they were closed. So we were in the campground by ourselves for the whole winter.
Nice.
Like, it was crazy. Like, some days we couldn't get out. But this time it went from, the first time was 7 months he was in the hospital. This time he went in, had the Glenn takedown, and was out within a week. Like, was back, and we were in a camper, and we stayed in the camper. We took care of everything we needed to there. And I had to come into Indiana to get groceries and stuff. That's how I found Indiana.
That's how you found
We
us,
were like,
huh?
I really
I
like
need
the town.
groceries.
It's small, it's nice, it's
Yeah.
quiet. And, I was like, I hate Florida. It's so hot and humid all the time. Tressa was like, let's just stay here. I'm like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna have to take a break. Liz has to go, so we'll be back in.
But I'm glad you got to come, and
Yeah.
we got to do it. We got in a workout
Yeah, we
before.
did. Whew.
Yeah, we did.
We'll talk about that in the other
That's why
side.
Justin's sweatier than
Oh my
usual.
God, it's why I haven't. All right. All right, guys.
Be good.
Take it where you can get it.
Thanks.
All right.
All right,
yeah.
guys, we're back. We're gonna finish up here. We're gonna talk about the last few things. Changes in your physical and emotional reactions. They call them arousal symptoms. You're easily startled or frightened. So when Chase was trying to punch his coworker in the face,
Yep.
that's one of the symptoms. Always being on guard for danger, backing into parking spaces. That's something we talked about with the training I had at CrossFit. Self-destructive behavior. This happens for a lot of people where they maybe start abusing drugs, start drinking, driving erratically, trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, irritability, angry outbursts, or aggressive behavior, and overwhelming guilt and shame. Anything anyone wants to add? to
Yeah,
that?
I mean, for all of those, right? Like, I have a history, like family history of alcoholism, and it was something like when I came back from deployment, I couldn't sleep, so I just drank. Spent a lot of time with Johnny Walker, and I drank myself to sleep basically every night for a long time until I I don't really know what the trigger point of it was, where I was just like, you know what, I can't sleep without this. That's a problem. And I don't want to fall into that mentality or be dependent on this. And I just quit drinking for a long time. And then it got to where I would only drink, socially. This year, really, like, it wasn't like a New Year's resolution. It was kind of like last year, earlier this year, where we just stopped. And it was mainly because I had started doing, these workouts. I had been working towards a better physical condition for myself. And I was like, man, every time I have drinks, or if I have wine, or if I have a mixed drink or a bourbon, like, that's just a ton of sugar. It's a ton of carbs. It's a ton of calories that I'm getting. And the next day my muscles don't recover fast enough. Everything feels bad. Like, there's no real reason to do it. So, I mean, we haven't had, it's probably been 8 months now since we've had anything to drink, like any alcohol. So, and I don't really miss it. It wasn't something that I wasn't an alcoholic at that point, but I do have alcoholics in my family. My sister was an alcoholic for a very long time, following some conditions and some issues. Like, her daughter passed away at 4 months old. Her husband committed suicide in front of her. Like, she's been through a lot. So from her, the way she dealt with it was through alcohol, and she continued to drink for a very long time. And, so we're seeing issues within the family, just like I know you've had issues with family in the past as well, how to deal with those changes and how to adjust it. But, like, for me, it was finally at one point that I just said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this to myself anymore. Nobody came to me and said, you're a shithead. Like, why are you doing this? Like, I saw something the other day where it was like, I was eating pizza and ice cream and not taking care of myself and sitting on the couch and being lazy. Nobody had anything to say. But now that I'm working out every day, now that I'm, I've increased my protein, now that I'm, drinking water and taking, vitamin supplements and things, everybody's a fucking doctor and has something to say about what I'm doing
Yes.
is unhealthy for me. And I'm like, seriously, this is better than what I was doing before. and I feel a
Chase,
whole lot
that
better.
was the best thing that's ever been
is.
said on this podcast in the entire time, its entire existence. No one will stop you from drinking and debilitating
Yes.
your life, but as soon as you start to improve your life, every single person knows how to do it better than you.
Yeah.
It's like a threat whenever you start bettering yourself and you're stopping the generational trauma,
Yeah.
right? Like you're stopping and everyone's like, oh, she thinks she's perfect.
Oh,
she
yeah.
just thinks she's just living her life so righteously. It's like, no, I got tired of living in the shit, the bottom of the barrel. I got stuck there for so long. I don't want to keep clawing my way out.
Yeah.
I can live better and make better decisions that set me up for a better life. And if you do decide to have kids, like your kids see that behavior and grow from it. They don't see every time that you're stressed, you grab alcohol and you drink, or
The one or two PTSD, like things that happened to me, Johnny Walker was a pretty good friend of mine at one time too. You know, he still comes to visit, but not nearly as much. But my brother called me one Monday morning, and this was a couple years ago. I was drinking way too much. And he said, "Do you want to get breakfast?" I said, "Sure." And it was like 10 o'clock, and I went downstairs and sat in the couch. Well, almost every single member of my family and a couple friends walked in the door at the same time, and it felt like they came in every entrance. I'm pretty sure they surrounded me. You know, it was like SWAT's outside. But they came in, and every one of them had a conversation with me. No one was like, "You're a dickhead." No one was like that. Like, they were all like, you know, "I've been on job sites. I've seen guys do this. I've seen guys do that. We all experience it. You just need to get your shit together a little bit." And that was big. But now if I have an event at my house where they're all at, the sweats come out. You know, It doesn't happen all the time, but like I get really super anxious whenever they're all at my house sometimes, because I think they're gonna like fucking. And they were as nice as you could be. They were as gentle as you could be.
And you needed it though. Joe Mingle, he needed it, so don't feel guilty about it. He needed that intervention.
Joe took me to Chappelle last week. So I guess
that was a makeup for it. So in kids, if you see this in kids, ages 6 and under, typically they reenact the event through play, or they have bad dreams.
Art.
Yeah, or artwork. So intensities of these symptoms can vary over time, and those symptoms may come up more when you're stressed. So kind of what we talked about earlier. Seeing a doctor, when to do it. If you're having disturbing thoughts around an event for more than a month, if they're severe, or if you feel like you're having trouble getting your life back together. I can't stress that enough. If you feel that you're constantly spinning out of control, you need to seek a mental health professional, their assistance. And especially if you're having suicidal thoughts, it needs to be immediate. Immediately reach out to a close friend or loved one. If you have a community leader, a spiritual leader, and we're fortunate enough now to have the 988 suicide and crisis hotline, and make an appointment with a doctor. I can't stress enough the importance of seeing a mental health doctor. When you go to your regular doctor, sometimes they're putting you on a depression medicine when they should really be putting you through to someone who specializes in mental health.
And you have to remember, they are doing their best.
100%.
They're not trained for that certain thing. You don't call over the guy that does your roof because he's in the construction whenever your furnace breaks.
Exactly.
You have to have a specific person to do drywall in your house.
I think one of the biggest things, and this is kind of a tough situation for me to talk about, because I've never gone to I was the deal with it on your own person, right? And I found ways, that there's a bunch of books here, that I found ways of coping with things and learning stuff on my own, and a lot of meditation to help myself realize that it was me that was causing a lot of these issues and not necessarily other people. But one of the things that I have, and I fully believe in this, is just because you go to meet with somebody and you're uncomfortable with them, find another doctor. Like if you're talking to somebody and you don't feel like you're meshing with that person, find somebody else.
And you guys did that you did that with your doctor for your child. Like you didn't just pick the first guy that everyone said. You're like, no, I don't. He doesn't align with what we want.
Yeah.
Same thing with a psychotherapist. I went through 2. The one was just like a yes man, and she just told me what I wanted to hear. I'm like, that's what friends are for. Like that. I don't want that in my therapist. I want my therapist to be someone who is like, what are you doing to contribute to this problem, and putting me in the hot seat. And it took me 3 therapists to find the one that works for me, and that was a life changer.
So there's a program we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but one of the things is I was assigned a health coach, and he really didn't have to push much on the physical and nutrition side because I was already kind of doing those things on my own. But he did. Every week we met, and he, called me out and stuff like, "Hey, you said you were going to do this. Like, hey, all those other things you did this week, that's fantastic. But you said you were going to do this, and you didn't bring that up. So either you didn't do it or what's going on." And he would call me out on those things to say, like, it's important. It was important enough for you to set it as a goal. Let's figure out why either you didn't hit the goal or why you're not bringing it up, because that's something we need to discuss. So it was, and I still meet with him, right? That program ended a few months back, but I continued working with him. So twice a month, we meet for 30 minutes to just discuss, next goals, what I'm working towards, what I'm doing, and accountability for him to call me out on stuff like, "Hey, remember we said we were going to do this, and what's going on?"
I love that.
Then you are meeting with a professional.
Yeah, well, what I mean is like he's not a psychotherapist.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
But you're doing your part
Yeah.
to make sure with all the books, that sort of stuff. Self-diagnosis it's something I got treated for anxiety for about 10 years, and it was actually bipolar too. And I didn't know. And you start researching this, and there's so many people right now with PTSD, and we're going to talk about complex PTSD another time. I think we might do a whole episode on complex PTSD. But some of the symptoms of that are like dysregulation when you're so angry and you don't know how to control yourself. And TikTok now has people believing they're autistic when they're not. It's ADHD. It's other things like that come across with the same symptoms as that. And that's why it's important to go to somebody that is a professional and be like, look.
Also, when you go to these people, don't try to outsmart them.
Yes.
It happens so much where you're not in with one integrity with yourself and being honest. You go in there and you try to just prove that you don't have a problem. But if you're not telling the whole truth and you're not actually talking about your symptoms, you're never really going to get help because they're only seeing this much of the picture. In the meantime, you're taking out all of these angry outbursts and things on your family and the people that you love, maybe not intentionally, but it's happening when you're triggered. And that's something our mental health is our own responsibility, especially for the people that we love.
Yes. And there are different types of therapy. There's EDMR, thought replacement, cognitive behavioral, a bunch of different things. But remember, when you go there, after a few sessions, your therapist comes up with a plan. So you might not think you're getting anywhere, but sometimes change happens so slowly you don't realize it until it's over, until you are changed. And when you said about it's not really a New Year's resolution, it's a lifestyle change. And New Year's resolutions typically don't work. By February, you're out on them. But if you make small little lifestyle changes here and there, eventually the big change happens.
Yeah, tiny change, like atomic habits. That was... For me, that was a huge changer. That's actually what kind of really kicked me into gear for working out was I looked for what's a small change that I could habit stack, right? And it started with I drink coffee every morning. So from now on, I will drink coffee while I'm walking on the treadmill. And that was how I got started. And I started walking, and I walked 2 miles, and I walked 3 miles, and I was walking 4 miles per day while I was having my coffee. And then I started doing, okay, well, now I'm going to do a bike instead. So I'll do the bike in this time, and if I didn't do the bike, then I'll walk on the treadmill. So it was the ability of taking something that I know I'm going to do every day and adding a positive habit to it. And one of their big things on there is just as easy as to stack a good habit, you would stack a bad habit. So you would say, if every time I do this, instead of doing that, I'm going to do 10 push-ups. Every time I want to eat a Twinkie, do 10 push-ups instead.
Habit stacking, I like that. I don't smoke unless I drink. And now you're putting 2 on top of each other.
Yeah, that's actually a good example of bad habit stacking. So talking about treatment, just to go over these real quick, different ways for treatment. This is from ptsd.va.gov. This is what they suggest for veterans. Cognitive processing therapy, CPT, you learn skills to understand how trauma changed your thoughts and feelings, and changing how you think about trauma can change how you feel. Prolonged exposure, PE, you talk about your trauma repeatedly until memories are no longer upsetting. This will help you get more control over your thoughts and feelings about the trauma. And you go to places and do things that are safe, but you've avoided because they reminded you of the trauma. So kind of like I was saying about going to my friend's house, like that was something that was hard for me for a long time, but it took me going there back and forth until it was no longer triggering. EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing involves focusing on sounds or hand movements while you talk about the trauma. It helps your brain work through traumatic memories. I like to listen to music, and I haven't done this in actual therapy with a therapist, but I do it and kind of in my meditation and talk about, like, what I'm going through in my head as I'm listening to this music, and it definitely helps calm me. And I don't know, my eyes go back and forth with the music, and there's something about that is really soothing to me.
I think it's you concentrate on other things, like whenever you're to get your mind off of stuff. That's why physical work is so important, like physical working out, because you have to be careful while you're in here so you don't get hurt. You don't have time to focus on that other stuff because you have to focus on lifting weights and doing that. And I think the eye movement and the sounds kind of make you focus on other stuff while you're focusing on that, and it takes a lot of the emotion out of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And different medications, SSRIs and SNRIs, and that's something you would talk to with a health professional. So,
so when why I never got diagnosed.
Sure.
When we came back from deployment, we were told, if you tell the doctors that you have nightmares or that there's any issues, they are going to hold you here and you're not going to get to go home. So everybody, just tell them you're fine and get out. Right? So that's what we were...
That was what you were advised to do.
That's what we were advised to do, right? So by the senior people who were... If you go in there and say you have nightmares or sometimes you trigger or you get startled easily, they're not going to let you leave. And then in 2006, 2007, if you came back and you had PTSD, but you refused to take the antidepressants because you didn't want those or you didn't like the feelings that it gave you, they would not give you the rating of being PTSD. So they would remove the rating or they would remove the diagnosis if you refused to take the medications. So that is why I was like, I'm not taking antidepressants, because I know there's too many people who have taken these, the wrong dosages, and have taken themselves out. And so that's where meditation came in. That's where how else can I deal with this on my own came in, because I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't willing to do that. I saw too many people who had gone through it and were just zombies. Once they started taking the medication.
And sadly, when I went to the training through CrossFit for mental health, they said, when people are depressed and not leaving their bed, they're less likely to kill themselves.
Yeah.
Then they go to the hospital, they get put on these SSRIs, and it's treating the symptom but not the mental problem. So then they get out and now they have the energy to actually do it. And that's the scary thing, right? Because, my best friend, her sister took her own life, and nobody was ready for it. Like, no one had any idea. Like, she was the best she's ever been. And that's such a scary thing, because you don't sometimes, when people aren't talking about what's going on inside, you don't know.
Yeah, and sometimes when you start to take the med, that fog lifts, and once the fog lifts, people always say, well, that med makes me an asshole, or that what. And it's kind of like that fog lifts, and it's like that's what, I don't want to say you're an asshole, but those are some of the things that you actually are. Yeah. So those are the things that you need to work on. And you're absolutely right. The increased risk of suicide with a lot of these meds is because you start to get better and you basically have the will to do it. You
have the
energy to do it.
So let's talk about the program that brought you to Greenfire and.
Yeah, so I joined a program from Mission 22, and I've got a big flag, so maybe one time I'll bring in the flag and hang it up here. Mission 22, their goal, a lot of people have heard 22 till none. It's very similar, right? The goal is to reduce veteran suicide, reduce issues with veterans who have gone through traumatic situations by giving them access to education, biohacking equipment and supplements, the things that you can try. All right, I spent a lot of time looking things up and I'm like, oh, that's super cool, but I can't afford to buy this to try it out and see whether or not it's going to work. So this program was a 12-month program. They have it for veterans and veteran spouses. The spouse program is 6 months. And when you go through the program, you are assigned to a health coach that works with you basically on your on your schedule. So you can meet weekly or you can meet bi-weekly or monthly, depending, but you do have to meet at least once a month with the health coach. They check in with you. They make sure that you're hitting your benchmarks. Each month or each quarter, they send you a box, and that box contains 3 books. You have to read 1 book per month, and you have to answer questions about the book and make sure that you're following up with the stuff. All of them are related to, for the veteran, they're like half of them are mental, how your body, the body keeps the score, and then half of them are more specific to being a veteran. So War and Soul, The Warrior's Return, Achilles in Vietnam, Odysseus in America. Like, so there's things that are talking about the correlation between like the Odyssey and people returning from Vietnam and how they were treated.
I meant to actually talk about that. Vietnam forward, there was obviously PTSD and stuff like that
Shell shock is what it was called before.
Shell shock is what it was. But Vietnam, it was you were in Asia, South, wherever Asia, and then 4 or 5, 6, or 2 weeks later you were home, and it was a lot of change. It was a lot immediate, and it was such a quick thing to process. And now I don't know what the time is from like when a war's over to when you're home.
Yeah, you're home pretty quick. Like,
and you
cycle in
right
fast.
And before there'd be ships, and they'd jump on them, and then they'd have days, weeks, months traveling and processing this stuff and talking to each other and that sort of stuff, and that helped. But Vietnam was like, bam, you're home and you're the enemy almost, because you shouldn't be fighting that war. And there's people saying this and that. Yeah. Magnum PI was, this might sound silly, but Magnum PI was the first TV show with a veteran of the Vietnam War that was shown in a positive light.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's tough because a lot of people feel like they were treated poorly, and they were. A lot of people returning from Vietnam were treated bad. And some of these books talk about it. Like, you're just following orders. Like,
sure.
You weren't there because you wanted to be there. You weren't, you didn't make the call. It wasn't your decision to do it. But I mean, each of these books talks about something different, right? The Body Keeps the Score. I mean, to be honest with you, is a very tough read. Like, it's not something that I would just like sit down and go like, "Ooh, keeps me engaged." But there's a lot of really good information about this from the studies that they do. Some of the other ones that like Atomic Habits was huge for me. I've read it 3 or 4 times now. They gave a Garmin because they want to track, and they actually do make you connect it with their system. They track your sleep, they track your heart rate, they track that you're exercising. They track those things because they want to see
that's awesome.
that you're actually, like, if you are showing all this great success in the program, they want to see that it's correlated to gym, right? And the fitness therapy. One of the other things that they do is they give you a gym sponsorship card. You take this card to a local gym. It has to be somewhere with a group fitness. It can't just be a Gold's Gym, right? It has to be CrossFit, Brazil, like jiu-jitsu, karate. It can be Pilates or yoga, something like that. It has to be a group-related thing, because a big part of it that they tell us is it's important to be surrounded by a community of people. It's super important. And that's how I got connected with Trista. Honestly, I kept this for a while, and for a long time I used my son's immunosuppressant issues as an excuse to not go to the gym. And I was like, well, I'll just work out at home. Like, I can't do that. I can't put him at risk to go out there and get sick and bring it back. And then finally I was like, you know what? I've just been using this as an excuse. Like, and Tressa had talked to you about bringing the kids in to work out with you. And I was like, why not? I'll get connected. And so I think I used like 2 months worth of it. And it actually will only cover when you're still in the program. So I was like, well, I didn't use any of the other months. Can't I just like push it out? And they're like, no, unfortunately it has to be for while you're in the program. But it's a great program because, the cost of getting started with a Garmin or a Fitbit, this one over here, which is a Muse, right? It goes on your head, and it's got sensors all over it, and it reads your brain waves based on how you're meditating. It tells you whether or not you're actually relaxed. This one was really hard for me because in the app there's like birds, and if you don't hear the birds, it means you're not relaxed. But then you'll hear the birds and you're like, oh, birds. And then the birds go away. And then you're like, why are the birds gone? What did I do wrong? So then you spend the whole time focusing like, how do I get the birds back? The Heart Math is, it's an Apple one, but it is about heart rate variability, like breathing and how to change your heart rate up. Like, you shouldn't have a consistent beat all the time. Your breath shouldn't be the same all the time. So it walks you through exercises to keep you out of a consistent, because your heart needs to be different. your heart rate needs to be different. That's why you're doing
Absolutely.
exercises. That's why you have, spikes in cardio. Like those things need to have changes. So they, you get access to all of these things and some, supplements that are help with mood enhancement, but they're herbal medicines, right? So it's not
Stimulant.
chemicals. It's just there to, as you need it. None of the things, and this was what I really liked about it, was none of it was required. It wasn't like, if you don't take all these drugs, you're kicked out of the program.
Yeah.
It's there for you to try it.
If you like it,
and
use
things
it.
that you like, keep using. So like the green juice is one that I've continued to use. We got one thing of it, and we've bought probably 15 jugs of this, and my wife uses it all the time now too. The Maria supplements, I still have them from when I was in the program because I didn't take it every single day. It's something that I use. The other one is the Monk Manual. So this one, I know Trista's talked about it before, but it's basically like a guided journal, right? So there's something that you're doing. There's a monthly section where you're talking about what your plan is for the month, what your theme is, what habit you're trying to build off of. You have a weekly one to track whether or not you're actually keeping up with those things. And then there's a daily one which gives you a breakdown of the hours per day, like what your main 3 goals are, your gratitude. So you could put 3 things that you're grateful for on there. I've gone back and forth on these, and I use just a blank journal now for writing. But I've had quite a few of these things, and having access to all of this stuff, and then a health coach, and then access to a gym made a massive difference for me and for my family. Like it got me out of just being at home all the time and not being willing to go out and meet with people, going out on the trail, doing the marathon.
Yes.
Like all of those things came from pushing myself out of my comfort zone.
And the cool thing too about this is I see just the things you're talking about here with working with your kids. I hear, your wife say, because they're here at the same time, focus on your breathing, focus on your heart rate. Like this is stuff they've learned from this program as a family, not just Chase. It's benefiting the entire family. So when the kids come and work out, I watch them take deep breaths. Ivani is 5? And she's taking big breaths to get her heart rate down, and she knows that at 5 years old. Imagine knowing that and understanding your body at 5 years old.
Yeah, no.
This is things. This program doesn't just help one person; it helps an entire family.
Yep.
And you're breaking that generational trauma, that fight or flight. Your kids probably won't know that fight or flight until hopefully they're adults, or they have like something going on in their lives that they have that. They won't have to have that constant fight or flight. And having conversations with your wife. Your oldest daughter started coming in and doing weight training with her. And she's like, I just want her to feel comfortable. And I was like, you are the mom that we all needed. like that's like amazing. And seeing that being passed down to kids, and it can all be starting from just a program like this. So this is something, I'm looking forward to doing something with Mission 22 because it brought an entire family that we're grateful to get to work with. And it's funny, like listening to you talk about your journaling of things that overlap, right? Because I do a gratitude journal. I do those kind of nerdy things too. And when I started working with Chase's kids, one day I was just like, hey guys, what are you grateful for today? And they each told me, and now it's a thing we do every single class. What are you grateful for today before we leave? And we go around the room, we say it, and then,
And it's funny, there's probably people listening that think that's great for those kids. But you got to do it. You got to do it for yourself too. Like as an adult, you can do these things, and maybe you don't have to like sit around, and singing Kumbaya with a bunch of other people. But you can think about it daily whenever you write this stuff down, or just think about it out loud, or tell your spouse, or tell your kids, like I'm grateful for you, that sort of stuff.
A big thing for us is I just try to be honest with our children, and Justin, I have had this conversation. I'm like, it sucks getting started, right? You get come back to the gym, you're working out, you haven't worked out in a week or two, and you're kicking back off. Or, from when I started, I hadn't really worked out for years, right? And I went from running Spartan races and working out, 4 or 5 days a week. Really, like doing compared to what I'm doing now, it wasn't really working out. But
that's big to learn too. That is,
but then when you get started, like it sucks, and you're gonna eat shit for a while, and it's gonna hurt, and you're gonna hate it. But I told that. To my oldest daughter too, right? I told her I know it sucks. I know it hurts. I know you don't want to do this, but what our goal is with having them come to work out with you and to train here is that fitness becomes fun.
Yes.
Not a chore, not, oh my gosh, this is so hard. They did the Murph and they had a blast. Like they were like, this was so fun. I want to do it again next year.
Yeah, actually working out compared to what you think when you just, go to your basement and do 3 sets of 10 on the bench, and then you do a couple curls for the girls, and then do something, and then maybe something over the head, and you look at yourself in the mirror like, look at my chest and shoulders, look how good I look,
And if only we had people in our lives, right, that supported us, and they said, like, instead, you get peer pressure to go to the bars, to go drinking. No one's ever peer pressuring you to go to the gym tomorrow.
No,
if we should
except for
start doing, or it'd been like triathlon.
Actually, Chase is actually
Chase triathlon. Let's sign up. October 14th.
Yep.
Chase.
Salzburg. We're doing it.
Okay. Well, I'll throw some stuff on the screen for that. I'm going to throw stuff on the screen too for all these books. Like I'll take a couple pictures. But Chase has actually become a mentor of mine. He sends me messages, encouraging and not encouraging.
Accountability partners. That's what we
and
started.
I appreciate it. Adam started coming to the gym a couple weeks ago, and he's just like, yeah. I'll text him, I'm like, Jim, and he's like, yep. And the other day I was going to come and I didn't. He's like, should have texted me. I would have came. And it's pretty funny. I come a lot more because of you two, because you guys know that I still don't like it. I do like it. I love the feeling afterwards. But man, today we were out there pulling the sled, and you'll see some of the video I'll put on here too. That was awful. But I'm gonna feel better for the next 4 hours at least. Yeah.
And you think about the benefits of, I had a one-on-one, and she said, why do I do this? And I said, for the longevity of your life, to be there for your kids and grandkids. And she goes, fair enough. And it's just when you start to think of it that way, why do I do this? And you start to think of the rational reasons of why we're doing this. We're doing this so we have longer, healthier lives, and that we are out of our beds and out of wheelchairs and out of, not using walkers for as long as possible, living on our own.
I feel 10 years younger. I really do. Like we were doing broad jumps out there, and I'm thinking the first couple of times I came here and we tried to do box jumps and stuff like that, and I'm all amped up. I'm almost 6 foot. I could dunk on a good day, it was awesome. And then I went to do one on the box, and I right up, and my foot hit it and almost fell. And I'm like, all right, you got me.
and the main factor in this is being consistent. If you're consistent and you work out every single day, or even if it's something as small as on your off days, walking 30 minutes a day.
Sure, walk your dog.
10,000 steps a day. Keep your body moving. Body and motion stays in motion.
I think active recovery is probably the best thing that I learned in this in this cycle of getting back into fitness, because it used to be like I would push myself and then I wouldn't want to do anything for 2 weeks because I was in so much pain.
Yes.
And now I'm like, I came in here the Monday after I ran the marathon. Oh. So I walked in and she was like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, hey, I know that if I don't keep moving, my legs are going to be dead.
And I love it because I think if I'm a gritty person, like I have grit, and I think I've met my counterpart with grit, because he is the same. When he walked in the day after the marathon, I was like, you're a psycho just like me. You belong here.
I know. And you and I started CrossFit, was it beginning of January?
Yeah.
And the progressions you've made compared to the progressions I made based on your determination and grit and stuff like that, I'm like, you son of a bitch. I was right there.
I mean, and there are days that the kids used to come in the afternoon, and I would go over there while I was on calls for work, and I would work on pull-ups, or I would work on jump rope, or I would work on something on my own before class, and then on some days I'll come in early. Right now I'm trying to get double unders, so it's something that it's a goal of mine. I hit myself in the head so many times, in the back of my shin so many times, or the calves, but it's something that I'm working towards. So I just set these little goals. Atomic habits, or I set a little goal and I have to work towards it. Every day I work towards something that I'm trying to do, which I'm trying to hit. Reading is a big one for me, or audiobooks, or
and you got your first kipping pull-up.
I did.
Well, we're gonna put that video. I'll send you the video so you can put it up there.
Look at those hands.
And when I was teaching them this in the clinic, I said, nobody posts these videos of where you're struggling, you look like a fish, you're pulling, you're doing everything you can to get up there, right? Those aren't the sexy things that you see on Instagram. So when people come into a CrossFit gym, they're like, well, I want to be able to do a muscle up. I'm like, so do I. I've been here for a long time. And it takes time and consistency until you dedicate the time for double unders. It took me a year. Yeah. I would go home with whip marks down my entire body, mad at the world. And then one day,
Got it.
there it was.
Rope climb was the same way. Like it was a fear for me, mainly because I did the rope climb for the Spartan race, but I didn't really know what I was doing, and I wrapped my leg around the rope.
Oh, ouch.
So when I came down,
it still happens sometimes now. You
well,
get a
it's
little
not as
brush
bad. That one I had all the way up my leg, and it was bleeding, and that was like halfway through the run, so I ran bleeding the rest of
And
the way.
it's like they're muddy and gross already. Oh, it's disgusting. I
Yeah,
remember
it's like
And,
you're
like,
gonna
there's-
get infected.
And there's layers of skin from everybody else that
Yes,
did it.
exactly.
Well, lucky you. This week you'll have some chances to do some rope climbs.
Well, I bring
so.
pants
Oh, I
on
can't
days
wait.
that I have rope
Wednesday.
climbs now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wednesday.
Okay.
Bring pants
No, they're
on
just
Wednesday.
always in my bag now.
Yeah, one of the beautiful things about gym therapy, the thing we do is when you work out like we did, and then you make yourself look foolish and you're sweaty and you trip and you do this and all that. When you sit down to talk about this stuff afterwards, it kind of takes away some of that embarrassment. I'm like, you already saw me fall on my face out there, so why can't I tell you about like the time that my family had an intervention with me?
So are y'all gonna work out every Sunday before?
Well, I mean, if the guest wants to, and if the guest doesn't want to, then I'll still. I don't
He's
know.
not going to.
I would. I just don't.
I think
just-
it's
the
worth
audio.
mentioning too. I think it's interesting and very awesome that Mission 22 wants you to go to a gym that is community based.
Yeah.
If you think about that, you left the military where you were in a community, you were part of a group, you were part of something,
Yeah.
right? And I think I'm going to ask in Discord with our group of athletes, how many people were in community based groups before they came to CrossFit? I bet it's a really high percentage.
Yeah.
Because when you leave college, you leave high school, you leave those sports or groups that you were in and go to nothing.
Yeah.
How that affects your mental health. Having that group and that camaraderie where everyone's kind of fighting for the same goal, the same outcome, is a big indicator of you sticking with it and staying successful.
And I think it's important for you to get together with people in your community, whether it's volunteering, gym, church, something like that. You got to get together once a week, once every 2 weeks, something like that, just to remind each other not to be assholes. And it's a good thing to be around other positive people. I really think that.
And just be of service. I think
Sure.
that there are not enough people do service because we get caught up in our own lives, and we have to remember where we came from too. You know, I mean, I think service, and I'm actually really excited to partner and do something with Mission 22 to benefit them, because this is a really great program.
Yeah.
So this is me saying it out loud. So we host an event soon.
Good.
We're gonna do it.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up now. Go watch the video on Farsi, the women's protest in Iran. I was kind of disappointed with the amount of views on that. I think compared to the other videos, I feel like we should have got a lot more. So if you made it this far in here, go watch that video. It's really eye opening to what's going on with the women in Iran.
And they need our support.
They absolutely need our support, and then I know we need our support too, but so do they.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Nice
Man,
job.
Absolutely, that was awesome. I'm so glad. I'm
work.
happy. You too, buddy.
I didn't realize that my arms were like sore until we just did that.
All right. Love you guys.
Love you back.
Go
See
outside.
ya.